Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. I have got a couple of guests today, one of whom might look familiar. He's been on the show a few times now, Mr. The Great, Ken Midgett. The other is his colleague at Interplay Learning, Dan Clapper. Today's episode has a very specific focus. After we get to know Dan a little bit better, we dive right into the importance of how the next generation of technicians learn. We also talk about how we can innovate the forms of teaching that we use to incorporate technology that they're familiar with. This can be used to attract new technicians to the industry, recruit both experienced and inexperienced technicians, decrease the time to truck, and increase retention. All very, very important topics of conversation today. Basically, the entire reason that this podcast exists. So, don't forget to subscribe to this channel and on our website at blueisthenewwhite.com to receive all the latest updates. As always, this show's not monetized and we don't run ads. Not yet. We rely strictly on word of mouth from our listeners to further the mission. So if you enjoy this episode, please take a second to rate it, review it, and share it. The future generations of tradespeople depend on it. They depend on you. So thank you again and enjoy this episode of the Blue is the New White podcast with Mr. Ken Midgett and Dan Clapper of Interplay Learning. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Blue is the New White podcast. I have some awesome guests today. One of them is returning for the 80th time, Mr. Ken Midgett. We've got back on the show with Interplay Learning, and also with him today is Dan Clapper, who we're going to get to know a little bit better, but we're going to talk all about interplay and digital learning in the trade space and what we can expect kind of in the future and for employers as far as how to recruit and how to retain the next generation of employees, of technicians. I'm really excited to have this conversation today. Guys, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Awesome to be here. Thanks.
Happy to be here. I think 80 is a little high of a number, but that's all right. We'll go with it.
We'll get you there. No, I'm kidding. Hey, so for those who don't know who you are, Ken, which if they listen to my show, they know who you are. But for those who don't, new listeners, why don't you go ahead and kind of give us a nutshell version of who you are and where you came from and how you got to where you are today, and then we'll move on to Dan.
Sure. Yeah, like Josh said, you can just scroll through and find me in other casts. But licensed plumber for too long, business owner for over 25 years. And I got into education, specifically career and technical education. I taught plumbing, heating in a secondary school in Pennsylvania. Then I left there, and when I did about 12 and a half years there, almost 13, left there, went to Nationwide, played in the innovation and digital organization space. And now I am as of July of this year, 2022, I am at Interplay Learning, plumbing market director. So I basically control everything that goes into the plumbing content in that vertical, and love it.
Awesome. Very storied career. And like you said, if anybody out there wants to learn a little bit more about it, go check out some of the episodes that he has been on in the past. And he dives deep into his story, which is a very, very interesting one. And you can learn a lot. So be sure to check out those episodes. Dan, how about you, man? Tell us who you are, where you come from, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Let's see. I always like to start out the story. Every weekend growing up as a kid and a teenager, my dad had his own HVAC and plumbing company in upstate New York. So he'd wake me up at 5 a.m. We'd go pull out an old boiler, put in a new boiler, do duct work. And I always tell everyone at the time, I hated it. All my friends were out partying Friday night, but I had to wake up Saturday morning and go to work. I went to college, dropped out first semester. I'm not the type that can sit in a classroom, listen to a teacher talk for 3 hours. I came back after dropping out, worked in wholesale for about 10 years. That's where I really started to learn more about everything HVAC, geothermal, radiant heating. I got really big into hydronics. jumped to the manufacturer side at the 10-year mark. Worked for a couple of the big major HVAC manufacturers, covering Mid-Atlantic, covering Northeast, eventually national roles. So I've met thousands of contractors across the country. And ultimately, I found the biggest challenge is the skilled trades, right? Like people just begging for new people, begging to learn. And I saw what Interplay was doing in the space, and it really caught my attention. When I went to AHR in January this year, it was still kind of dead because of COVID, but there was long lines for VR. You know, Daikin and a couple other people had the VR booths on, and there was just long lines of people. So at the time I said, you know what, this is the way training is heading, this simulated training. I want to be part of it. So very similar to Ken, everything that deals with HVAC and Interplay learning, I'm involved with. So it's super fun.
Oh, that's awesome. We're gonna dig a little bit more into that. Let me ask you a question. When you were in high school and your dad was, you said it was high school that he was waking you up?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. So when you were doing that, and that's something you didn't want to do, was there a point? I mean, obviously there was a point, but at what point did you say, you know what, this could be something kind of cool?
I think what really, there's two parts to it. It's number one, the work ethic. You know, you when my father was waking me up and just going, he taught me that, you know, get all the work done first and then play in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So when as I saw my friends in the early 20s that still didn't have a job, didn't know how to make money, he taught me that very quickly, with the skills I have, I can go make money. So as I worked for the wholesaler, I would do jobs on the side because I knew I could dive in. I knew how to thread pipe. I knew how to run ductwork. Like, very quickly, if I needed money, I can make it happen pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable, isn't it? I hear that a lot. And like, you know, the other thing I hear too, and Ken knows this, is the entrepreneur thing, right? Like everybody wants to be an entrepreneur these days, you know, that's up on this pedestal, you know, but they don't associate the skilled trades with entrepreneurship. They associate software, right? And like online, you know, social media stuff, influencers, you know, agencies. You hear this kind of stuff. This is like the common ground for becoming an entrepreneur in the digital age, you know. And I love to be able to reel that in and remind people that I saw some crazy statistic just a few days ago that said that I think it was like 60% of all small business owners are trade related, something like that. It was above 50%. I don't remember the actual percentage, but come on. I mean, like you said, you'll never be out of work, right? You have these skills and you can monetize them. So anyway, that's a rabbit hole we don't have to go down. But right. But it's true, right? And so I love that mindset and that ethic.
It's great.
All right, so let's get into the meat and potatoes a little bit of what we want to talk about today. So Interplay, let's start with that just a little bit. Can you give us, Ken, let's jump to you. Can you give us just a little bit of an overview? If anybody isn't familiar with Interplay and what you guys actually do, you know, Dan dropped some hints with the VR and the simulated learning and stuff like that, but can you give us an overview of what Interplay is?
Yes, it is a pretty cool software that is highly engaging, and it has a video component where it's just a video for learners. Everything has an assessment. It's great for administration from implementation. And then it has the VR component, which can be used with a VR headset, or you can use it on a desktop computer or on a laptop. So that's highly engaging, right? Because we're teaching muscle memory and all these different steps to do a given task. Right. And then there's also a score. There's an assessment version where the student's going to be challenged even higher. So it's very unique, and it's only for the skilled trades. We're not in the world of academia. It's only for people who are going to work with their hands.
No, that's awesome.
And you want to go take that a little further?
Yeah. The way I love to talk about it is just picture a mechanical room, right? So what we do is we build a simulated mechanical room. So whether there's a furnace or a water heater or, some electrical panels or what have you, in this simulated environment, just like you're in a video game, you can go in and we teach you the steps of how to service equipment, how to maintain equipment, how to play around with the wires and check voltage. And what's really cool about that is you're in a simulated environment, so you're not going to electrocute yourself, or you're not going to burn out controls. I mean, when I was learning with my father, I'd burn out controls every weekend. I mean, you make mistakes when you learn, but if you can make those mistakes in a simulated environment, when you get out to the real world, it's just that much more powerful.
Oh, absolutely. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't light myself up a couple of times too out there in the field while I was learning. And for those who don't know out there, I use Interplay Learning, right? I'm a customer of Interplay, and so I've got techs that have learned via this platform and via this software. And it is wild. Like when Dan and Ken are explaining it, it really is a first person game, right? Like you think about, well, I don't know, some of my listeners are probably too young to remember the old computer games like Doom and Duke Nukem and stuff like that. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but it was like the first person games where you saw the hands, you saw the tools, you saw the weapons and stuff like that. And, Interplay, I specifically remember, when I was testing it, having the hands, you can see the hands with the meter, right? And you're like going up to the piece of equipment. It's wild. It's really, really cool. It adds an element of gamification that I think we need in this space, which kind of is a good transition to talk about how maybe employers can use this. Let's start with how they can use this to attract the next generation of technicians. Ken, you want to take this one?
Sure. I'm gonna give it right to Dan.
Pass the baton.
Yeah, go ahead.
I probably have
Dan, if you want to.
I probably have a good story of that. I mean, I have a 10-year-old, right, and he's gaming all the time. And if you think a lot of these games, these adventure style or these strategy style games, you start out with no skills, and you have to learn your way to get through the map, to get through the different levels, and kind of figure out the process along the way to get the badges and get the better tools, right? So when you think of these are how kids are learning. I mean, my son is 10 and he can beat a lot of adults in the game because he's learning these processes so quickly, right? So when you look at how we set up our training in a simulated environment, it's the same thing. When you first show up, we're gonna teach you how to use that multimeter. And then as you go through, you learn the different steps. And towards the end, some of the harder programs we have, there's no training wheels. Like, okay, you're in front of the equipment, it's broken, figure out what's wrong. So it takes people along that same pathway that they're used to learning from gamification.
Yeah, that's really wild and incredibly valuable. Ken, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I'm going to add on to that is that, Dan talked about safety, and it's true. It's like that nobody can get hurt. And I really want to emphasize two things. One, this VR environment, it's the real thing. Like when you have to get down and measure voltage on a condensing unit, you have to bend down and kneel on the floor to get to the contactor. And if you're going to turn off a valve on a toilet, you've got to touch that valve handle. So you're going to get down just like you're sitting in front of a toilet. That's one thing. Second thing is, I'm sure there's plenty of people in your audience and probably even victimized from this is, I'm only going to tell you once, right? If I got to tell you twice, you're going to wear this sign on you for the rest of the day telling everybody how stupid you are. This takes all that away because this learner can now engage with this platform and do it as many times as they need to. They can answer their own questions just by going through the flow of it and the way it's designed. On the front end of it, when the learner first goes through, it's kind of like helping them as the step by step as they go through. And then as Dan said, at the end, all that comes out and now you're on your own. You've got to be able to activate and get through this diagnosis on your own. So it's a safe environment from the culture problems that could potentially be in a company where, people that are up in years just don't want to they don't have patience to teach anybody. They're not teachers, right? And they only know how to teach the way they were taught, which is getting fittings winged at them and yelled at and,
Yeah.
being embarrassed and condescending comments. That's the only way they know how to teach, because that's the way they learn. So this takes that whole environment. It's a paradigm shift, like for the learner, right? In a different environment.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's huge. So, my next question, I guess, is that's really great, for people and young people entering the industry, right? People of that generation, people who don't respond really well to that type of learning, right? The getting shit thrown at you, kind of method, which is how I learned as well, and I'm sure how you guys learned too.
Oh man, terrible.
But how do we cascade this, right? How do we make it known? Because there's this perception that we all know that exists around this industry now that is how it's done, right? Brass knuckles, blue collar, you got to have thick skin kind of atmosphere, kind of culture. So how can we use Interplay to change that narrative?
I think it's something that we have on our radar with using it as a career development tool, but it's nothing concrete or yet. But imagine that, when that 7th or 8th grader goes in that guidance office, I think we're going to finally get to the point where we're going to have the guidance counselors brainwashed and make sure they understand they have to tell them that the learner the student has a choice, right?
Yeah.
So imagine them being able to either just use a desktop, or in the greatest environment, put on a VR headset and play around, right?
Yeah.
I think that could be a game changer for many 7th and 8th grade kids to think, wow, this is what it's really like to be an HVAC person or an electrician or a plumber or a solar expert or whatever they want to go into. And they could be short snippets to just let them get an idea what they are, but they would have an immediate understanding. In fairness to the guidance counselor, how do they describe what it's like to be a plumber or an HVAC person? How do they describe that?
Yeah.
How do they say that, right? And their parents, probably the student's parents probably doesn't know anymore. So I think there's a place there for our product to sit to maybe help be a recruiting tool.
Yeah, no, I see that definitely. So let's transition that into then how can it actually be used today by employers as a recruiting tool, right? So marketing to the next generation, that's one animal, right? And then just actually being used for a recruiting tool for employers today is another benefit and kind of another parallel. So Dan, I mean, how do you see how this can be used as a recruiting tool?
Yeah. So this is what I love, right? Some of the, what's the right way to say this? I mean, any contractor you talk to, they probably have active job postings right now. I mean, everyone's asking for people. Everyone wants more people. And a lot of those postings are for skilled roles, right? I want someone with 2 or 3 years experience. I want them to know what they're doing. And quite frankly, that pool is so tight right now, they're not getting the people. So how I envision, or how people are actually using this is, okay, there's I think the statistic I saw is there's 50 million people in the US that are making $15 or less, right? So how do I open up my applicant pool to that monster group? And it's by saying, look, we have this HVAC technician role, or this plumbing technician, electrician technician role. We'll train you. We'll have an in-house training program, and we'll get you up to speed in 3 months or 6 months, or a set period of time. But we'll train you, and as you go through, we can give you bumps in pay, fairly quickly, get you to, what some people are making after 4 years of college. We could get you probably within a year or two, right? Like by following our in-house training program. So it gives people that maybe don't have a set of skills, but are looking at like, oh man, here's an opportunity. I don't have to go sit in classroom. I can learn while being on, combination of on the job and using this Interplay platform, and get up to speed really quickly.
Do you have any examples, and you don't have to name names or anything, but do you have any examples of companies that are utilizing it in that capacity just very, very well? Because, and I'm asking from a learning standpoint, because like I said, I have, I have Interplay implemented, but I haven't really gotten to the point yet where I've developed an in-house curriculum around it, like an actual structured training program. It's available for the technicians, and believe me, it's on my to-do list with 15 and a half other things, that I want to implement. But I'm curious as to, if you've got some customers that use it in this capacity and how they do.
We do have a couple contractors that have shared success stories and have cut, dramatic time cut down
Really?
from a green technician to somebody who's productive. Go ahead.
Yeah, the metric we call is time to truck, right? When we talk to a lot of people, sometimes they're saying it's a year or two before they're in their own truck.
Yeah.
But if you can implement a program like this, it can be 6 months or less, right? So how quick can you get them to where they're profitable? And it's a combination. We're not saying that we solve the world with our software. That our best contractors are doing a combination of, Interplay learning and on-the-job training. And what's really magical about that is the on-the-job, the training is so much easier because they learned all that base knowledge before they showed up to the job.
That's right. That's right. Everything resonates. When they're in the field, it's not like, hand me a contactor, and they don't have they don't know a contactor from a screwdriver, right? All that's changed now, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that, for people that are in your situation, Josh, is that there are ways for you to create a learning path. So you could sit down and look at the courseware and say, in the first 4 months, I want this entry-level person to be able to do these things. Well, then you can build that course content so that they have to go through that path and learn those items, right? And then you have to go that next step, like Dan was talking about, and marry that up with, when they're going through those courses, the extra lift on the administrator or the employers to try to get them in the field doing that work with a journeyman.
Yeah.
Right, with a technician. Now you have the icing on the cake, right? You have the person learning it in a safe environment. They're getting all the pre-knowledge they need to do. They're learning the muscle memory to actually do the work, and they can be observed doing the work by a technician in the perfect environment. So it's the best place to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see it as such a powerful complement to traditional training, right? And that's how it's got to be viewed, I think. And this is just a general curiosity. You guys have, from what I've seen, you've got a couple different styles of platform, right? You have the full immersive VR experience, right? And then you have like the simulated learning, which is a 2D experience, right? Kind of like a first person experience. Have you noticed, or do you have any data around how quickly people learn on each one? Has that a point you've gotten to yet where you could measure like who goes through VR and who goes through just the regular simulation and how that affects actual learning?
Not exactly sure.
Okay.
I don't think we have data, but
that's just
I would say the usage of our platform, probably 60% of people are using computers and tablets.
Yeah.
Maybe 10% of people are using VR, and the rest are watching videos on their phone when they, while they're sitting in the truck or so. But overall, what's unique about a simulation is, if it's just a plain video course, you can watch a video course and just click through the answers at the end and maybe get it right. In a simulation, you actually have to do the task to get to the next step.
Yeah.
And that's the real difference of how simulations actually train better than just watching a video.
Can I ask you another question? And I'm just super curious. I'm sorry. So if I ask too many questions, just stop me. I'm kidding.
all
Don't.
good.
It's my podcast. No, I'm kidding. Again, but no. So like my gears are turning now, guys. And so one of the things that I preach, I do a lot of public speaking in like the industry sectors, talking to companies and organizations. One of the things I talk about is recruitment, right? And refining the hiring process, especially through what we're seeing now with the need for skilled tradespeople. A lot of people will just, hey, if you've got a pulse, you've got a job, which is the wrong attitude, right? And one of the things that I like to preach is that, the best way to evaluate if someone is going to be good at what they do or can stand behind what they do is to see them and watch them do it. So we have literal sabotaged pieces of equipment here in our warehouse where during the interview process, we'll put a technician back there and say, okay, tell me what's wrong. Do you have anybody using your product in a capacity during the hiring or interview process as almost a test to vet technicians coming in? And if not, why not?
You want me to get that, Ken? Or you
Yeah,
got
go ahead, Dan.
So we definitely have some people. They'll take their laptop and they'll turn it around to them and say, okay, this is an air conditioner. Show me name these parts or walk through this. I think there's more that can be done on our side to actually create a product that's a what we would call a hiring assessment. And when you talk about things that are coming, that's probably where we'll get to is, here's a standalone thing. You as an applicant can sign in and let's see what your skills are, right? So that could be something coming down the road.
I'd buy that right now on this podcast. I would.
Yeah, the other thing that it can be used for is increasing pay scale based on productivity, based on completion of courses. So the real world application is the learner does the course, they pass the course, you put them in a vehicle with a technician and they do whatever the skill set was, install a toilet, put in a thermostat, attach a set of gauges to a piece of equipment, whatever the skill set is. And then you monetize that. You say, okay, you've met this skill requirement. Somebody else has signed off on you that knows how to do this. You get an X percentage rate raise. So that creates a lot of different things, right? That creates retention, right? That creates a reason for the person to learn, the inspirational side, right? A higher level of engagement, ownership of their career, right? And a reason to finish the course. Right? A reason, not because you're telling them to do it. Now they have a monetary attachment to completing the courseware and wanting to learn and get themselves in that truck and get some independence going.
Yeah, which is absolutely huge, especially for this up and coming generation. We've been hiring a lot of apprentices lately because we've kind of switched our mindset. Basically, everything that we're talking about now, right, is experienced technicians are very hard to find. We've decided to create this apprentice program where they start in either the install or the PM department. They work with their way through. They become an apprentice technician, level 1, level 2, level 3. So we have this whole trajectory, right, that they can follow. And what we're really trying to do that's on my to-do list is create the curriculums around this trajectory. Okay, you're at level 1. To get to level 2, you need to do X, Y, and Z. But what I'm finding is just the visual that there is a path resonates so much with this next generation. It's unbelievable. I've had at least 3 of my new hires say, that's the reason I came aboard, because you have this picture. And everyone has told me that I can be a master tech, but nobody has told me how. And so
that's beautiful.
Yeah. And that's
the vision. You have a vision for them to see.
Exactly. And that's where I see Interplay, fitting in like a square peg in a square hole, I mean, because you have just to what you said, Ken, is you can create, those curriculums and attach the incentives to each one. So my next question here kind of is the design of the software right now. Is it geared more towards this apprentice technician, or do you have modules that would appeal to an experienced technician looking for higher learning, or is that down the road?
I think a little bit of both, right? We definitely have some more advanced content. We have a ton of content that starts with someone knowing zero too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we've really developed well is we can now build courses very, very quickly. So the magic number, believe it or not, we have 120 courses slated for 2023. So we've built this engine to we built this way to make courses all internally, and now it's such a smooth, well-oiled machine. You know, as we get requests for content, we can slot them in. So for example, if there's specific content that senior techs are looking for, we'll make sure we slot it in. And I think probably Ken can speak to this too. Part of the neat thing is, because we're in all the different trades, is there's cross training too, right? I might have a senior tech that's been doing HVAC for 25 years, but he's still kind of light on the electrical side, right? So maybe he can go back to some of the earlier electrical products too.
Yeah. Yeah. And to Dan's point, the repetitive side of things, you know I don't have to explain to you, Josh, how important safety is.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of safety embedded within our courses. We have courses that are specifically for safety. There's even more that are going to come out in 2023. So these older people that have been in the trade, seasoned technicians, sometimes they develop bad habits.
Mm-hmm.
You know, jumping off the back of the truck to the ground because they got so much testosterone, right? Just walk down the bumper and get off the truck. You don't have to jump off the truck. You don't have to try to lift something by yourself, because now you're going to tweak your back. Now you're banged up. So, you know, from an administrative standpoint, from the business owner perspective, you know, sprinkling those in, even for the seasoned technician, yeah, their eyeballs are probably going to roll, but, you know, hearing it over and over again develops habits that become good habits, less injuries, right? I think there's a place for that to be said. The other thing I wanted to touch on too is that, you know, a lot of business owners, this is education, right? This is a different spin. This is a whole different philosophy of the way I learned when I came up in the plumbing trade. Entirely different, right? So there's a learning curve for the owner and the administrator to think, just like you and I, the three of us are talking right now, about how might you implement this to make it get the best bang for your buck, return on investment, right? So this is great to have these discussions so people can hear different ways to tactically implement this so that it really takes off for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, it's such an amazing, I mean, it's an amazing product. The other thing, you know, my gears, you guys are turning them again. So in this path that I talked about before, right? You have a path all the way to master technician. The variance, or I should say the caveat in having a path, is that we have three trades here, right? And what we're finding is that gone are the days where you can find a technician who is versed across all trades, right? We're finding more and more specificity. They say that word slow, of talent, right? That, you know, they stick to their niche is a lot of times what we're finding. We got a refrigeration tech. He likes to stay to refrigeration. You got an HVAC tech. He is HVAC, you know, but a lot of companies are like me. Like oftentimes you'll find residential HVAC companies who also do plumbing, right? And so they're seeing the same things. And so a value here that I see is being able to cross-train, right? That path that I was talking about goes all the way to master technician, but then there's a little bubble that says, okay, well, you get X amount of increase for every time you go through this trajectory for a different trade.
That's right.
You know, and I think there's practical application for that here.
And I think from the retention side, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, and it helps with seasonality too, right? I mean, when your guys are slow in certain seasons, you can kind of switch them over to different types of roles.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a retention thing. I think the employer needs to sell that. I'm not going to polish the word. It's the word sell. You need to sell that to the recruit or the existing staff that, go anywhere else in my market area. Who else is going to train you like this? Who's going to give you these skill sets, right? I'm not charging you for this training. I'm paying you to do it, right? And I'm paying for the technician in the field to observe you doing it correctly so you can get your pay increase. So there's a lot, this is costing me a lot of money, and I'm doing it because I want to invest in you as an individual for the sake of the company. So I think there's a speech there to be had from ownership to the employee and to the prospect of an employee, just like that. Who else is going to do this for you? Look what I'm going to give you. Look at the skill set that you're going to take with you the rest of your life. Yep. This isn't just, this is the whole thing about differentiation between a career and a job, right?
That's exactly right. And so I have a very close industry friend that I talk to about this, and he has a philosophy that I've since adopted, right? And he built a very remarkable business, and he one of the things that he prides himself on is being a resume builder. This is what he teaches his staff, right? If you work for me, I'm going to build your resume. The second that you leave, you risk not building your resume anymore. So yeah, you can take the knowledge that I give you to another company, but they're not going to give you what I can in the way of actually providing you with a new skill set, and continuing to do so, which means a lot. And if done correctly, right, big asterisk, if it's done correctly, I mean, that's a huge retention tool because people won't want to leave. They'll continue to build their resume with you until they retire, right? Because, if it's properly incentivized and fairly incentivized, and, it's just who's going to want to leave and be stuck. Right. So it's
plus we're building, Dan and I are on the warpath trying to hire more subject matter experts for this. Think about that. When you're, 48, 52, 56 years old, do you really want to be on your knees or humping water heaters up and down steps when you could be just using your skill set in a different way, right? You could be talking to a curriculum manager and helping build a course and using your skill set in an entirely different way. So this product lends itself to that. This whole thing of online digital learning, it lends itself to that situation too. So somebody retires, maybe they didn't plan correctly, they're in a trade, they can still utilize their skill sets.
Wow. See, that's a whole nother angle, right? You hear about the technicians and how they're retiring at a rate of 5 to 1 for every person that's coming into the industry. But what if we could actually continue to capture that knowledge, right, and cascade that to the next generation, instead of just letting them go home and watch TV for the rest of their lives.
Exactly.
Which anybody in the trades will tell you that they're incapable of doing that, right? But yeah, that's huge. I'm glad you brought that up. Sorry, give me a second. I'm writing that down. Now this is great. Wow, we have covered a lot already. We've been talking for almost 45 minutes now, if you can believe it. So let's move to wrap this up so we can leave room for a round 2, or in Ken's case, a round 87. And because I definitely want to continue to have Interplay on the show so we can stay up to date with what you guys are doing, the new courses that are coming out, how it can be utilized in our industry and through the people in it. So before we wrap it up, though, is there anything that either one of you wanted to interject, wanted to make sure that we covered before we say our goodbyes?
One thing I really love to say, right, is when you talk to a business owner, they all have growth goals, right? So let's say it's 10%, 20%, 30%. I always ask the question, well, what percentage are you growing your people? Because if you want to grow your business 10%, 20%, 30%, you need to grow your people that way. The knowledge of the people you already have, and you need to bring in some new people too. So if you want to grow your business, you need to grow your people. And I think some owners know that, but they're not really applying that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's powerful. I like that a lot. I think we found our snippet, and you weren't picking your nose, so that's good. Clean, man, clean. No, I love that a lot. You know, what percentage are you growing your people? Because it's true. And here's the other part is that even the people that aren't making it a priority to grow their business in the skilled trades are growing at a faster rate than they ever have actually in history, which is amazing. And so we do have to think not only in our own companies, but as an entire industry of how we're going to grow the people.
Right.
Perfect. Love it.
And there's an expectation out there. I mean, the smarter person entering the skilled trades, entry level person, there's an expectation that you're going to help them develop professionally, right? You're going to help guide them, steer them, tell them what to do, how to do it. I mean, some corporations have mandatory requirements for professional development, X amount of hours per year. If you don't do it, you don't get your bonus. So it could be utilized the same way. And what person, I mean, I think you have to create that culture in the company to Dan's point that the employees want to do that. They see the value in the additional skill sets. That's, you know, once they learn those skills, nobody can take that away. You know, when times are hard, you're the last person to be left go because you have the most skills. You're the most versatile.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And that. Oh, I could do an entire episode just on that last statement, but I won't. Not yet. But no, that's some really good insight there, Ken, and Dan, from you too. This entire episode has been incredibly valuable, and I hope that anybody listening, you know, has been taking notes. If not, re-listen or rewatch this episode again, because there's a ton of information in here that is going to be extremely, well, it's relevant now, but it's going to become even more irrelevant as time goes on, or more relevant, sorry. But so anyway, hey, listen, I appreciate both of you coming on the show today and lending me your time, my listeners, your time. Thank you so much for everything that you do for the industry and the people in it.
Thanks for having us, buddy.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.